while he was at work. He was a grave digger at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery then. And he used to have to walk, and it was early. He used to have to go very early in the morning. And so he was gone all day. And these women that he hired, first he told me to make sure they did what they were supposed to do. And big tattletale, I told them everything they did. So they didn't work out. We had, I think it was only about 4 or 5 weeks that he had these people. One drank, one took the money, he gave the food and didn't buy the food. And I don't remember what the other one did. But anyway, none of them worked out. It was all women that weren't qualified or anything. I don't even know how he got them or where they came from. But none of them worked out. And one of them hit us, I think. So he just was at his wits' end. Oh, we had Immaculate Conception. And he asked him what he should do. And in the meantime, my mother's sisters, and one of my father's sisters wanted to split us up and take each one of us to their home with their children. And my father didn't want to do that, just to be together, thank God. So he told the priest that. He said, I want them together. So the priest said he would try to get us into Gonzaga. So he made the arrangements, and we went out. We all got new coats and new hats and all new outfits, and that was great. So the 4 of us went, and it was in the evening that we went after dinner on a Saturday, I think. It might even have been a Sunday. And I'll never forget the house, when we walked up, it was so scary. And we were all hanging on to my father, and my Aunt Teresa was with him. And she was a very stern woman. And we walked at these big, big steps. There were the house was enormous. It was made out of gray stone. They used to make houses then like castles with the stone. And this big, big door, a great big porch around the front, all the way with big white pillars. And there were steps, like 4 steps and then a path, and then 4 steps and a path. I think there were 4 or 5 terraces like that before you got to the steps that went up to the home. And the home, they were enormous too. We were little. It seemed so big to me. It was frightening. And we got to this big door that was enormous, big wooden door, rang the bell. And then we went in, and there was a vestibule when you walked in. And the nun came to the vestibule. And then on the right-hand side, there was this big parlor. There were 2 parlors, one in back of the other. And the front one was where we sat, and they had these old horsehair sofas that they don't make anymore. And they were hard. And we all were sitting there, and then when it was time for my father to leave, it was awful. We were hanging on him and crying and yelling, and I was yelling. And I just remember him saying, take care of the bag. Now take care of the bag. And he always said that to me. Anyway, he left, and my Aunt Teresa went, and this nun started yelling at us, this Sister Mia. Especially me. I should know better. That was my, making him feel bad. I was crying and carrying on. And he was feeling bad. My father was crying, of course. He was upset, poor thing, leaving us. But, so then they took us down to into the old house. There were 2 buildings. One house was it was probably someone's house at one time, a big old wooden house. Wooden and not concrete, that white stuff. Stucco. And it was old. And that was joined to the big main house by a corridor. And in the corridor was stucco and wood, but in the middle of the corridor, we called the jinx. And that was where the toilets were, excuse me. There were like 10 stalls. And I think there was only 1 sink. I can't remember where we washed our hands. I don't remember sinks, but I remember that. And there was never any toilet paper. We used to keep Sears Roebuck's catalogs and stuff really in there, and pieces of paper, any old paper we could find. because there was never any paper. And then you walked up through there, and then there was the old house. And the old house was the playroom. They had two playrooms, one for the little kids and another one in back of that for the older kids in high school. And they had some tables in there and some, like a horsey and things for the kids. Well, I just remember going in there, and it was very noisy. And of course the kids were all running around playing, and I was so scared. We were all frightened except for Patsy. She went right in. She was the littlest, and all the kids loved her. All the other kids, because there was only another little girl, Sweetie McCormick, her age. So they all came running around her. And I remember sitting against the wall, and I was mad because they didn't pay attention to me, But I was glad for Patsy, too, that she was content, and I felt relieved. I felt like a burden was lifted off me. But I was scared, too, sitting against this wall until bedtime. And we went to bed very early. I guess we went to bed around 8:30. And then I remember laying in bed being so scared. One thing I liked, I had my own bed. Little tiny beds, but it was my own bed because I used to have to sleep with Kay. And half the time, Mary and Patsy would come in too. We didn't have any room. So anyway, I was glad to have my own bed. But then Patsy used to come in with me, and that was okay. But, she'd get scared in the night still because she was only little. And she'd come in. And then that next morning, I remember waking up, and I was glad I was there. Because then I wasn't responsible for everything anymore. My father used to make me responsible because I was the oldest, and that was the way they did in those days. So I was relieved to be there. But of course, after a while, and I went through the whole thing not hating it. Kay hated it. Hated it, but I never did after that first time. And I wasn't afraid anymore because it was orderly. And I didn't have to be responsible all the time, and I knew they were safe. And I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Take your time. It's fine.
Patsy was so little.
How old was she?
5. Well,
how old were you?
I think I was 9.
How long was it between when your mother died and you went to...
That's when none of us can remember. I think it was only like 5 or 6 weeks. It wasn't long. And every time he would have to get rid of these women, because they didn't work out. And I feel kind of guilty now. I think I told on them all the time because he used to tell me to, And, but when we went there, after we were there a while, I remember and he was so handsome, my father. He really was. And I was in love with him, of course. I guess all kids are with their father. But he was beautiful. And he used to come to see us on Sunday. And he always went to church first. So he was always dressed in his one suit. He always looked so nice. And he would shave, and he had a haircut, and he really looks handsome. And we just couldn't wait to see him. And he came on Sunday. But then some Sundays he started to take us, after we were there, I don't know how long we were there before he took us to visit my Aunt Nelly. And I used to hate to go there because she had 5 children. And in those days, of course, they didn't have the things they have today. And the house always smelled like dirty diapers. I always hated that. And then Aunt Nelly used to get drunk. And she'd serve dinner, and it was always a mess. And oh God, I couldn't wait to get home, back to Guns again, where at least it was peaceful. It wasn't quiet, because there were always noise, kids running all over the place. But to me, it was peaceful. It was, and I didn't have responsibility. I think that was a part of it too. But then too, we had routine. We knew every minute what we were going to do. We got up, and I used to hate. We used to have to get up so early in the morning, and we didn't go to mass every morning, but we went a lot. We used to get furious. We'd have to get up about a half hour earlier to go to mass. And then we came down from after mass, or if we didn't have mass, we'd come down to breakfast, and the breakfast was delicious. It used to be hot cereal in the summer. I guess in the winter, and I think in the summer too, come to think of it, because they didn't have cold cereal. We used to and they used to make oatmeal, and they used to make cream of wheat and had the big lumps. It was delicious. And then we got a piece of toast or bread and a glass of milk. And I forget, that's about what we got for breakfast. But it was so good because we hadn't eaten from 5 o'clock the night before. We didn't get any snacks from 5 after dinner, and we ate at 5. I used to be so hungry between then and bedtime. But we'd have breakfast, and then what? Oh, then we'd get ready for school, or we'd do our jobs. We all had certain jobs to do. We had to make the beds, or whatever we were assigned to. And I usually got the damn beds. And you got a row of beds to make every day. And this was before 8th grade, while we were going to school in Gonzaga. And then, when I wasn't there too long, I discovered this room. It was called the library, and where we did our studying at night. We didn't go there. High school kids did. I guess we studied in the classrooms. But we did study from 6 to 7, I guess, something like that, or 7 to, I forget. Anyway, in this one library, they had these books, a whole wall, books in back of glass cases. And when I discovered that, that was the end of me. I read all the time, and I could get in there sometimes. Sometimes it wasn't open, but a lot of times it was. And I sometimes would sneak the books out. They were all the old classics like Thackeray and Dickens and all those. Boy, and then I never kept my eyes out of a book. I loved that, and that was great for me. So I stayed there till I was in 8th grade. I don't remember too much about those years except being hated. Oh, another thing that happened that I hated. My father used to take us to see my Aunt Nelly no, not my Aunt Nelly, Aunt Julia, and that was my mother's brother. Uncle Patty was our brother, and Aunt Julia was his wife. And they lived in West Philadelphia. So we had to take 4 different things to get there. Streetcar, then the subway, and then the elevator, and then a streetcar. And we'd go out there, and he loved to take us there, and he'd make sure we were all dressed, and he'd pick up the dresses to see the underpants were clean, and it was so funny. He'd make sure no holes in the socks. And he was so cute, he really was. He used to take us to the store called the German store to buy our socks and underwear. It was so funny. And he'd stand outside a lot of times and say, "You go in," and I'd go in. We'd all go in and get what we needed. He was cute. Anyway, when we went to the West Philly, it was awful because we'd sit. He was fine going out. He always found the way. But my sisters would start acting silly and carrying on, and I'd get mad at them like I was the old grouchy mother. Stop it, yelling at them. and that was all right when we got, and we always looked nice. And then when we got to West Philly, we were with my cousins and their friends. They lived out, I forget the name of the street they lived on. But all the kids would gather around us, the orphans, and I hated that. That was awful, the orphans, And we always felt kind of funny. But my father would get drunk. Oh, boy. Coming back. And then he'd get mad at me because I would forget what station we were to get off or whatever. I found the way when we didn't go too many times. I remembered then, and I didn't get us lost. But a couple of times, he would be so drunk, he didn't know what the hell he was doing. One time he got off the L, I don't know what stop it was. I guess it was the Yale, yeah. The Yale used to go from 54th Street to City Hall, and then we got the subway. So I guess he got off the Yale before we were supposed to, or I did. I did it, I guess. I don't know. Because he used to say I was, when he was drunk, I was the one that had to tell the way. And I remember it was raining, and the four of us are hanging. He had this big umbrella, and he's talking to a cop. I have that in my mind, that picture of all of us hanging on him and asking the cop. And the cop was furious at him, yelled at him, and he told us how to get home. But we got home anyway. We always made it, but I hated that. So, and then of course, I was so glad to see Gonzaga. And I don't remember what happened after eighth grade. I went to high school, and we walked far. We walked from Gonzaga, which was in Germantown, to past the shrine where the miraculous medal. You don't remember, but anyway, it was a long walk, and we used to walk in the snow and the rain and everything to St. Vincent's Annex. That was a part of Little Flower High School. But it wasn't too bad now that I think about it, because we were all together. And we'd play along the way, but it was a good half-hour walk.
Would nuns bring you there?
No, no. The older, we were in first year high school, so we knew. And once we knew the way, then we could go by ourselves.
So when you were in grade school, you went to school in the home?
In the home, yeah. And we had two grades in one class. Third and fourth, no, first and second, yeah, first and second were in one group. Third and fourth, and fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth. And one nun taught the both classes. And this one nun was Termia. I think she was a sicko. Now, when I look back, she was. She didn't like kids if they were Italian. She only liked Irish kids, Irish descent kids. She really messed up poor Mary, because she loved Mary. And she was always yelling at us. And one time, this is what I do remember this, one time we used to have to go when we took a bath. Now this is crazy, but when we took a bath, we had to wear these white things around. They weren't white, they were like a cream color, and they were heavy burlappy material. Not burlappy, like a linen, but not linen. I don't know what it would be called. But anyway, it was one sheet of this material, and you had to wear it in the bathtub. You couldn't be naked. Now, Patsy was like 7 or 8 or 9, maybe. I forget, maybe 8. She was taking a bath, and she didn't have the thing on, or it fell off. And this nun started to hit her, and I jumped on her. I'll never forget that. She was going to hit her because she didn't have the damn thing on her. She was a really nutcase, that woman. But she was a good teacher as far as teaching us. And I had her for 2 years. No, I didn't. I only had her for 2 years. I had her in the 5th and 6th grades. And then another thing that happened, when I was in 8th grade, and maybe I was in 7th grade, no, 8th grade, this one nun, Sir Gervais, she was a sort of a dreamy kind of a person who read a lot and was kind of half there and half not there, if you know what I mean. But she was all right. She was nice enough. But one time, I don't know what I was doing. I used to be sitting reading all the time or playing. I like to play board games still then too. And I like to do jigsaw puzzles. So they had a lot of those in the playroom. And I was in the little kids' playroom, and I don't know what made me walk into the big kids' playroom. And I was older then. I was in 8th grade, so I wasn't in the big kids. I walked in, and here she was sitting on the Father Ganley's lap. And I didn't think anything of it. That's how dumb I was. I just went, hi, and I walked out again. Well, about a couple of days later, Father Ganley, I used to give the priests breakfast too. They came every day to say mass for the nuns, the priest did. and we took turns, or I don't know how it arranged that we brought the tray up for the priest to eat, and I got that then, and I brought his tray up. Well, one time, this a couple of days later after this episode, um, he called me over, and I went over. He gave me $10. He said, share it with your sister. And that was a lot of money in those days. I always felt guilty because I don't think I shared it with them. I think I kept it all. Big pig. So anyway, but I never told anybody, and I didn't even think of that. You know, it must have registered, because then after that, Sister Gervais gotten so mean to me. Oh, she was mean to me, and she was teaching me. She was the 7th and 8th grade teacher. And she really got terrible. I couldn't do anything that she wasn't yelling at me, punishing me. So, and I didn't connect it. I really didn't. I was so naive. Well, anyway, at the end of the year, school year, after we graduated from when we were going to high school, we had like a ceremony after 8th grade. And she came over to me and she said she was sorry. And I didn't know what she was saying she was sorry for. I thought maybe she was saying she was sorry because she was yelling at me all the time or something. But it took me years before I figured out what was going on. Really. Stupid.
Oh, but how would you know? Because you weren't exposed to
No. And I didn't see anything wrong with her sitting on his lap. I mean, I just thought, well, so what? They're friends, you know. What do I care? But I'm sure they were afraid I would tell somebody or say something to somebody, but I never did because I didn't think anything of it. And I think she thought I did, see? So that's why she was afraid. She left shortly after that. And I think she left the nun. She left. So which she should have done, which is good, because I don't think she was a bad woman. I always liked her before she started picking on me. But
well, when you got picked on by these different nuns like Sister Mia, what kind of things would...
they pick on you for?
Yeah.
Well, Sister Mia, it was because stupid things like, well, maybe I think Sister Mia was probably her hormones or something now when I look back. But for like if you had your socks on crooked, or you had your hair not combed, or you forgot to brush your teeth, some different kinds of things, or you didn't hang your, we had this lavatory where we had to, in the morning when we got up, we had to go downstairs. We had to get dressed, and we didn't have hardly any clothes. We each had a locker. Why we had lockers, I don't know, because we didn't have anything to put in them. Maybe we had one change of a dress. We had a uniform for school, and we had a dress, and that was it, and underwear. And I don't know. Mary said that to me. Where did we get our bras? I don't know. I can't remember. I don't know how we got. I know my father didn't buy them. I don't know. Well, anyway, then we'd have to go down. We'd get dressed, and then we'd go downstairs where this big lavatory, like rows of sinks with water, like maybe 10 faucets on each side. And there would be our glass and our toothbrush and our washcloth and towel were on the wall with hooks. And we each had a number. So like if you didn't hang your towel up or your washcloth, you'd get, Sister Mia would find out, and she'd yell at you, or she'd tell you you couldn't have dessert for dinner or whatever. You'd get punished for different things like that.
What were some other punishments?
I can't remember now. Mostly I think it was denying you or yelling. Oh, she hit you too. She'd hit you. Now, she was the only one. I think Sister Benedicta used to hit too, but she never hit me. Sister Mia's the only one that I remember hitting me.
These infractions are so small.
I know they are. But see, to them, it was like, it sounds worse than it was, really. It sounds like a reform school, and it really wasn't. I'm so glad that we went there, because at least we were together. And then when we were there a short, I don't know how many years, maybe when I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, I don't remember, my father came to work. Oh, no. The first few years he paid our way, because they used to have the Catholic Bureau. The Catholic Bureau, and that was a social mark of status in the home. If you were paid by the Catholic Bureau or your parents. You know, if your parents paid for you, you were, you know, hot shot. But if the Catholic Bureau, you were a peon. See, among the kids, this was. And to me too, I think, the nuns treated you that way. Well, he paid for us the first couple of years, and then he got laid off. They had a strike, and he didn't have a job. So what he did was he came to work for them at night, and he did that free for them for I don't know how many years, in lieu of our board. And I mean, can you imagine what it was like for him? He really was remarkable. Anyway, he did that for how many years? They finally found a job, and he'd do that in the daytime, and he'd come over at night and do the groundwork. In the wintertime, he would clean out the trash and do stuff like that. And then,
Which was good for you because you
oh,
got
we
to
saw
see
him all the time, and the other kids loved him too. A lot of them called him Daddy Manning. He was wonderful. He really, really was. He was gruff sometimes, but he was drink. But even when he was drunk, he was funny. He was so cute. Anyway, what was I saying about that? Oh yeah, then he came to work there. They asked him to come and work there. So he used to eat his lunch there. And he got good lunches, you know. So he'd take, if they gave him pork chops, they gave him two, you know. He'd put one in his pocket. And if he saw one of us, he'd give it to us. He was so cute. Or an apple or whatever, because we didn't get much food. We got enough to sustain us, and we were all healthy. None of us got sick. Amazing. And it was cold at night. They turned the heat off. That's another thing my father did. He came when he started working there and took care of the furnace too. So he was there from the time I was in 7th grade, I think. So until he stayed there. He worked, that was his job until he retired. So he always was there. So that was good too. That made it better for us than some of the other kids. And when we first went there, it was terrible for some of those Kay will talk about this, and it was awful for some of those kids that were older than us who had they didn't have high school in those days. Some of them got to go to commercial. They called it commercial. It was a 2-year course. And like it was connected to the churches. Immaculate Conception had a commercial. And they taught them typing and stenography and things. And they could get a job. But some of them, when they got to be 16, they were put out. And a lot of them ended up on the street. What could they do? They didn't know anything. They couldn't do anything. Maybe they got a job cleaning houses, but by then, this was like in the 30s. The Depression, and people couldn't afford to have house people come in to clean much, you know. So I know a lot of them. I remember one time, this other couple of girls and I went to see this one girl who had been in the home, and she had an illegitimate baby, and she was a whore. She was living in this awful apartment. I don't even know how we got there. Winnie took us. I don't know how she knew to get there, but I'll never forget the horror of that.
And that was a girl that you lived with.
Yeah.
At 16, she was put
Yeah,
out.
but she was only there for a year or two before, oh, maybe more than that. I guess I was in 7th or 8th grade when she left. So it was 4 or 5 years that she was there while I was there. Yeah, that's what they did in those days. They didn't, and then they had some women who worked there. One woman was blind, almost blind, and another woman was crippled. And then they had a woman who played the organ, Veronica. She was a miserable thing. Had been people who went through the home, but they had no place to go. And for some reason, the nuns kept them. I guess for Lizzie, who was the cripple, they had to, what could they do? And then Margaret Brown, she was the one who was she had a glass eye. And she did all the laundry. They had a separate room. No, the laundry was in the old house. And like they would take an older kid. I had charge of a younger kid. You never got your family. I didn't get Patsy. I had an older kid. I don't know who. Forget now. I remember when I was in 8th grade who I had. This kid called Bunny Dubin. But we had to take care of their clothes, like wash their clothes, and you did your wash once a week. And some of the clothes, though, the big, like they did all the sheets. They had this big dryer and big old refractory, they called it. It was like a dryer, big washer with a steel tub, real big thing that rolled around like that. And Margaret Brand did all that. But then we had to do our own, like laundry, our shoes, our socks and stockings and stuff, underwear and blouses. We had to do ours, and the little kid, whoever we were in charge of, they called him your charge.
When you went there, did an older kid help you?
Yeah, yeah. And real, I just thought she was so great. I forget her name now. Isn't that awful? I can't think of her name. I've been trying and trying. There were 2 sisters, and they were very glamorous, but they had a mother. And when they left, their mother took them. They were old enough then, I guess, for her to take them. They moved out of the state. I don't know where they went, but and I can't remember their names. They were very pretty, and she was very nice to me.
Why would people pay to have their kids live there?
Well, because they had no place else to put them.
But they couldn't stay with the parents?
No, a lot of them were single mothers, or the husband had one left. It was during the Depression. A lot of the men just took off, left the women with the children. Most of them were, there were a couple families, but a lot of the kids were single, like one child, and they had a mother or a father. Most of them had a mother. And then there were kids that were put there by the courts. Maybe the parents fought, or maybe different reasons. I don't know. I don't remember now. But a lot of the kids were there without any parents too.
They were just
Nobody.
orphans.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, not a lot of them though. Come to think of it, when I was first there, when we were little kids, the older kids that were there that I told you got put out, they were orphans. They were real orphans. But when we were there, by then, most of the kids we were with, there were 90 kids in the home when we were there. And most of them, by that time, social conditions in the country, even though there was a depression, social conditions had gotten better for the poor people. In other words, the churches were stronger, there were more social agencies, there was more help for poor people than there was in the 20s or the teens, from 1900 till 1920 something.
What year did you go to?
We went there in 1933. No, maybe 34 it was, 1934. So, and even though the Depression came right then, it was during the Depression, and the Depression didn't end until Roosevelt came in, which was around 1940, I think, 38, 40. Well, but by that time, social conditions, as I say, had changed, so that there were more people who didn't abandon their children than there were in the times prior to that. That was very common. And of course, a lot of them died too. They were young. They didn't have the medicine. They didn't have the things they have today. So a lot of the people died young and left children behind.
Well, that's what I wanted to get back to your mother, because she had heart condition.
Yeah, she had, and she also had arthritis. And she shouldn't have had children. The doctors kept telling her, but they didn't know any better. And of course, they were very Catholic. And so they didn't practice birth. And my father blamed himself till he died. If only I had known, he used to say, if only I had known then what we know now, she'd be alive. But he didn't know, and neither did she. Neither of them did. And they didn't have any way to prevent it. But he used to say, if I didn't drink, she would be alive. But it wasn't that. It was just, they were human. So, I did. I blamed them too for a long time when I was a little kid. I didn't know any better. The nuns used to say snide remarks. I don't remember specifically, but her, Sister Mia, you know, the old Irish thing that you practice denial and you don't be human. You don't be. I don't know what they expected, but they figured they shouldn't have relations because didn't want children. They should. I don't know what. Not be married, maybe. I don't know.
Well, if do you think that if they had better access to better health care, it would have made a difference, or it wasn't anything that
Oh yeah, sure. She wouldn't have died. She had too many children. She had five children in 5 years. The last one died. She just had too many children too soon, and her heart couldn't take it. And her arthritis swelled up. She couldn't move things. Sometimes her hands would swell up so bad. She couldn't walk. Her knees would swell up. And she was only 34 years old when she died. But see, everything was leached from her body, and they didn't have the diet. They didn't have the medicine they have today for pregnancy. While she was pregnant, everything was leached out of her, I think. And she was just exhausted.
she was?
Yeah.
So was she sick when you were kids? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the doctor coming, and I remember the smell of medicine in the house. I don't know what kind of medicine. It smelled to me like Listerine smells today. I'm sure it wasn't that, but that's what it smelled like. The house would smell like it. And she'd be in bed. And then my father, he used to do the cooking. And of course I did a lot too. She taught me, my mother. And I guess Kay too, but mostly me. Why, I don't know. Because I was the oldest. See, that was the old way though. The oldest was to take over. And that was the way it was in those days.
You
Yes,
were so young.
I know, but see, to them it wasn't. You weren't allowed to be a kid very long in those days. I mean, today they would think my father, I don't think he would, maybe he would. If they were 10 or 11 or 12, he'd think they should be out working in the fields. That's the way they were. It was hard life. Life was so different. Very hard for those people. They're really very, very brave, strong people to survive the way they did. And I used to think that too. I used to think, how did they come here? They used to tell the story of my mother when she first came here on the boat. She had never seen black people. And she thought they stopped in the wrong place. She thought she was in some other country. She got off the boat in New York, and she was scared to death. She ran back on the boat. She saw black people, I guess men, taking this stuff out of the boat, and she saw them, and they said she ran back on the boat. This my Aunt Kitty told me. She was screaming, oh, they're in the wrong place. She thought they were stopped in the wrong place.
Who did she come over with?
Well, she came over with, see what they, the story about how the one they would save up, the family would save up over in Ireland, enough money for a passage for one. Then that one would come and get a job and save up and send the money back for the next one. They went by age, except for the oldest, because the oldest got the farm. So that was how she came. I don't know who sent for her. No. Oh, Uncle Patty sent for my mother. They had my Uncle Patty came first. It was her brother. That's the one who lived in West Philly. And he was a nice man. And he sent for my mother, and then my mother sent for my Aunt Kitty. And my Aunt Kitty became, by the time my mother had saved up enough money for Aunt Kitty, was it Aunt Kitty? Yeah, Aunt Kitty. My father and mother were married, and they lived in an apartment on Broad Street. And this was before I was born, I guess. And Aunt Kitty didn't know any better. She was going to live with them, see? She thought she was just going to stay with them. She didn't know she had to get a job. So my father had to tell her. He said that was an awful thing he had to tell her. And she was so shocked. But you know how people were in those days, too. First of all, they didn't have much education. Half of them couldn't read. My father could read. I don't know how he learned. He had a little schooling. And my mother could read because they used to read the paper and all, and they used to listen to the radio. But a lot of people couldn't read or write, and they couldn't even write their own names. They write an X. So they didn't think either. The way you can't imagine what life must have been for them, because they didn't think the way we think. They just went on instinct or habit or.
Well, they grew up poor on a
Yeah,
farm.
right. And what did they know about anything?
The most basic.
Yeah,
living, I guess.
right. But intelligence, they were intelligent people, so they knew they were able to use the reasoning that power they had, even though they didn't have knowledge. They weren't stupid. So they learned. And then they came here and they learned how to fit in. Oh, and they were always very conscious of, I remember when I was a kid of my parents being, especially my mother, being hating to be called greenhorns or being, looked down on because they were greenhorns. And in those days that happened a lot. And then of course the Irish were prejudiced against the Irish. They had signs up, no Irish need apply, on jobs, on stores and things. And my father and mother hated that, especially her. She used to get furious.
So were they very involved at the church then?
No, I don't think they were involved so much as they went a lot. And my mother went. They went to, I guess you would say they were involved. They knew the priests. The priests used to come to see her when she was sick. The priests were more involved with the families then, I think. It was the other way around, not the families being involved, but the priests being involved,
Well, I guess that's why your father felt like he could turn
Yeah,
to
right.
priests
Yeah,
to
because
help him figure out what to do.
yeah, right. Because the priests were the ones who did. They came to the houses when anybody was sick, or if you needed anything, somebody would tell the priests or the nuns, and they would try to get it. They were really, really, very good, and even the ones at Gonzaga, a lot of them were in there for the wrong reasons, but a lot of them were very good women, very good people who wanted to help, wanted to make the world better. And I think they did.
So, did your mother, she had her brother and sister here?
She had a brother and two sisters. Yeah, my mother and Uncle Patty was the only brother here, and Aunt Nelly and Aunt Kitty. Yeah, two sisters, and my father had four people here too. He had Aunt Nelly and Aunt Teresa and Aunt Mary and Uncle Packy. So he had one brother and three sisters here. My mother had the same, one brother and three sisters. There were them, of those. Now my father had five and she had four. Yeah. And they used to come visit. Now Aunt Nellie and Aunt Kitty were single. And they worked, Aunt Kitty worked for this really rich old family, an old line, Philadelphia old money family, Doughtons they were called. And they had a farm in Ambler. And they used to close the house. They lived on, I think it was around 24th Street or somewhere around those big old brownstone houses downtown, around 24th Street. It was around St. John's Church. I don't know if you know where that is. Well, it was downtown anyway. And it was a big old house, like 4 stories, narrow brownstone house, great house. And he had my Aunt Kitty, she was the cook. Aunt Sarah wasn't my aunt, but we called her my aunt. She was the housemaid and the waitress. They had a chauffeur, and then they had a woman who came in and did the heavy cleaning. So they had a lot of help. And then that was just for the townhouse. Then in the summer they closed that house and they moved to the farm. And in those days, of course, they didn't have cars, so everything had to go on like a horse and buggy, I guess, to move the stuff.
Did Aunt Kitty live there?
Yeah, they lived there. And she had her day off on Thursday, And that was one thing they did. They came to see us, not often at Gonzaga, but whenever they did, the two of them would come, Aunt Kitty and Aunt Nelly, and they always brought us something. And we were always so glad to see them. But then, of course, when we got to be older, in our maybe 8th, 7th, 8th, in our early teens, we would make fun of them. We were so rotten.
Wait 1 second. Do you think that's getting too bright on the side? Yeah. Yeah, we have to stop for a second
Okay.
right now.
That's good.
Because you really. A minute before the flash record, but I did too. That's why it was only 14 minutes. Okay, okay. And Nelly, do you remember, what is the name of the home?
It's called St. Joseph's Gonzaga. And that was written in the lintel above the front door. St. Joseph's Gonzaga.
And who ran it?
It was run by the charity nuns. It was they're part of the Vincentian Fathers at the Miraculous Medal Shrine, on Chelton Avenue. Not Chelton Avenue. Yeah, I think it is Chelton Avenue, isn't it? Wherever it is. It's a big shrine. It's still there. And your father used to go to Novena every Monday to it, and Bob and I did too. We did as kids. It's still there. It used to be a seminary for Vincentian Fathers. They're missionaries, and they used to go all over the world. I don't know if it's still a seminary, but it was for the advanced years, like not the beginning of their priesthood. And they started the Miraculous Medal Novena, and the Miraculous Medal Shrine is there. And downstairs they sell a Miraculous Medal, all kinds of things. And they show some of their missionaries' places that they went, where the missionaries, the fathers and the nuns, they were all the same kind of order. But ours were called the charity nuns with the big bonnets, the white bonnets. I think they started in France.
They weren't Carmelites?
No. Carmelites are cloister nuns. Carmelites are where there is a place still on Ogons Avenue in Germantown where they have a cloister. And I forget, they're called the Sisters of the, I can't remember the name of it, but you could still go there, and they open a little window, and you can't see anybody, but you ask your special intention. My father used to go every year, take us all on my mother's anniversary of her death, and I guess he gave $1 or whatever, and you ask for the prayers, and then your name they include you in their prayer list, and they pray constantly around the clock. There's somebody in the chapel around the clock, and they're not allowed to see people. They're cloisters, and that's a different order. They're Carmelites.
Now, how many girls slept in the same room?
We had 2 big dormitories, and well, when we first went there were 90 girls until, I guess, about 40, 45, no, 40 in each dormitory. From 1st to 6th grade were in one room, and then upstairs on the next floor were the other higher grades. And they had them in order of grades. The youngest ones slept near the front, and back to the back were the older girls.
I'm sorry, so you were just saying about the room?
Oh, the dormitories, we called them, the dormitories. There were 2 of them. And then the nuns, in each corner of the dormitory, there were 2 boarded off areas where the nuns slept. 2 nuns, 1 nun in each corner of the room. So there were 4 nuns that slept in the dormitories. And then they had another area of the building where they had a room for the nuns. And I guess there were 8 nuns there when we went there. And they had, I didn't tell you about the infirmary. We had an infirmary too, where we used to have a dentist, Dr. Brophy. This was after we were there a while that the dentist started to come, because I don't think we had a dentist the first years I was there. But he used to come, and we didn't get anything. He used to just give us drill our teeth with we didn't get Novocaine. After a while we did. But in the beginning, when he first used to come, so we were really scared of the dentist. And they had a dentist chair installed in the infirmary. And they had a doctor that came once in a great while if somebody was really sick. I forget his name. And one time I got trench mouth. And I was put in that's why I lost my teeth. I was put in this room, and I was kept separate from everybody for 6 weeks. I had to stay in the infirmary, and then every day or every other day maybe, I used to have to walk over to, well, from Gonzaga to, you don't remember, I guess, but over to almost where the Church Immaculate was. And and it was in the wintertime. I remember how cold it used to be. And he used to paint my mouth with that purple stuff. And they had to keep my food separate and all my utensils. 6 weeks I was in there. I was in about 7th grade. So, and then of course I lost my teeth because they ruined my gums, were destroyed. I guess they didn't have the technology then to treat it. It was not called trench mouth. It was called some other disease. I can't remember the name of it, but that's what we called it. And
how long after that did you lose your teeth?
Oh, not until I was grown, after I had my children, after I had Kevin. But the dentist told me I would because my gums were so bad. I had worked on them. I had gold fillings even put in when I was young, when I was working, trying to save them, but nothing did any good because my gums were just, whatever the disease was, it affected the gums and the roots of the teeth so that they fell out.
And you were isolated for 6 weeks?
Yeah, for 6 weeks I was isolated. And Mary too, one time Mary got appendicitis and she was oh boy, it was awful scary. She'll probably tell you about it. But she was taken to the hospital in an emergency and operated on, and then when she came back, she developed something. Now, I don't know what it was, I forget, but she'll know. I think it was something with the stitches, an infection. She almost died. Not from the but from the post-operative, whatever they did wrong. And they had to take her back to the hospital, and I remember the smell. Oh, it was awful. Because we could see her. She was in the infirmary, but she could have people come and see her, you know. She was really sick for a long time. I don't remember how many weeks.
How old was she? Do you remember?
No, I don't. I don't remember. Maybe in 8th grade. I think I was in high school then. But you have to ask Mary. I forget, the date. I forget times. Vaguely. Just association with different things that happened do I remember times.
So they didn't have a doctor there?
No, they had to call him. He didn't come unless there was something, and half the time you had to go to him. Tracy, that was his name, Dr. Tracy. Yeah. But the kids didn't get sick very often. That's one thing. Oh, another thing I remember was going out in the snow. We had in the old corridor, they had these radiators. And we'd go out in the snow, and they had these big hills that you could sled down. Great. Oh, they were great for sledding. Kids used to come in from the neighborhood to sled, and the nuns used to let them. But mostly it was girls. They wouldn't let the boys in. And we used to sled down the big hills, and then your hands, we had galoshes. Mary and I were talking about this the other night. Galoshes, they were old-fashioned kinds of things that the latches were made out of tin, kind of, and they were ingenious now that I think of it. You pushed it through the hole, and then you snapped it over, and it snapped like I guess you call it, I don't know what, there's a word for it, like a hinge. And it really did keep the snow out, though, better than the boots today, except some of the boots are better. But I remember when well, go ahead.
You better stop.
Oh.
Sorry. I hate